I'm really bad at this. That is the basic physical stuff, and we need to work out the more advanced stuff now. So we need education, science, technology. This is the civilization stuff. Faith, magic, culture, militarization, and previous civilizations. Now, a lot of this stuff, when I've done it myself before, for myself, I've kind of done it just while thinking. There hasn't been hard and fast rules for it. But I've unconsciously, well, not even unconsciously, I've kind of had my own rules in that it has to be consistent, it has to be, have its own internal logic that it sticks to, and it has to kind of make sense, as well as be genuinely interesting and add something interesting to the world. However, when I've been creating a setting, this part, the education, science, technology, faith, magic, cultures, militarization, and previous civilizations, has always been a hard and fast rule. Always. Back to the very first game world I ever created, a place called Nartel, where different parts of the world had totally different versions of this. So I had to figure this out before. So we have 8 attributes, right? 8 attributes, which will be ranked 1 through 10. So we're going to need to go here. So we're going to go to here. We're going to go to here. We're going to bump this up. So we're going to go here. And here. So we're going to go this is 0. This is 10. That is roughly 5. Roughly. So we're going to go 3. No, that's not right. Or is it 4? Actually, that should be 1 because it's not a 0. There is no zeros in this. 2, 1. 6, 7, 8, 9. So you. Yeah, this kind of, the scale of this went out the window. Doesn't matter. It's close enough. I need to change the camera slightly. Okay. So we have, amongst many other things, we're going to have education. Ed, science and technology come from that. We have faith and magic. Then we have culture. I may need to make this bigger. Culture, militarization, and prior civilizations. So okay, the way I work this is we have 8 of these. I give myself 50 points, so we have 50 points. That's it, to scatter across all these. So theoretically I could get 5 of these at 50 and nothing else, as in they do not have anything. Now there are certain things that are absolutely required. Mostly one thing. There has to be a culture. That is an absolute requirement. Have to have culture. Because otherwise you have no life. What you have is mold. And fine, you could have a world that is just mold, but it's not going to have culture, well, aside from being a culture, but so that's that. If you have a culture, you're going to have education of some kind. That's another absolute requirement. If you have education, you're going to have an understanding of the universe and the world to some degree. Science. And you're going to have one other thing which you are absolutely going to have a score on, which is prior civilizations. Those 4 are absolutes. You have to have them. You can have a world that has education and science but no technology. Maybe what you have is creatures that are basically gigantic mountains that don't move and all they do is think and talk. Now, that doesn't mean that there will be a prior civilization as such. It doesn't mean that there'll be cities and that, but there could have been previous cultures that changed over time. Or some of those giant mountains got wiped out and there was a disruption in the psionic fields large enough that they were alone for a couple of centuries, and what came out afterwards was a completely reshifted and reoriented culture. Giant mountains. Okay. Now, science does not necessarily mean a military. You could have a world that's full of pacifists. It's unlikely, but you could. Magic doesn't necessarily exist at all. Faith doesn't necessarily exist at all. You could potentially have a world of atheists. Right. The world we're creating. 50 points, okay? Faith is a 9. So, that's a 9. That's our faith. This is a high faith world. Magic is only going to be a 2. Why is it only going to be a 2? And why is faith so high? Generally speaking, in campaign settings, magic and faith tend to be balanced. Certainly in the AD&D settings, in my experience, there seems to be a balance point between the two. You have some worlds where, like say Dragonlance, where originally all magic came from the gods, and when the gods went, all magic, faith, and arcane, poof, until it didn't matter anymore. But yeah, I could be slightly misremembering that, and if I am, please let me know in the comments. But yeah. So, in this world, faith is very powerful. I want faith to actually have physical manifestations in the world. However, here's the thing about most campaign settings I've played in. In most campaign settings I've played in, most systems I've played with, magic is hard mode, early game, and easy mode, late game. Arcane magic, I mean. By which I mean, early in the game, you have bugger all health points, you have bugger all constitution, you've bugger all strength, you've bugger all anything, and you have maybe 1 or 2 spells a day. And if one of those is magic missile and you miss twice, you're screwed. Although, can you miss with magic missile? I can't quite remember. On the other hand, with faith, you could have something like turn undead. You have heal, like a low level heal spell. You might have purify water. You'll have something that isn't particularly powerful in that respect, but instead you might have a cleric who could be almost as tanky and as beefy as a warrior or a fighter. I'm okay with that, but in this setting, I don't want that to really be an aspect. I don't want the physical side of it to be an aspect, and I don't want that flip. Instead, what I want is, faith is very powerful, but it's very widespread. It's pretty normal, which means that there would be cultural checks and balances in place to keep people more connected to the gods with greater power under a certain amount of control. This is where taboos and traditions come into effect. Magic, on the other hand, arcane magic, I want that to be for people who like to figure out tricks, who like to figure out puzzles and figure out clever ways of doing things. So with magic of 2, what you have are cantrips. And cantrips are, in AD&D, cantrips were basically very, very minor spells that could not mimic more powerful spells. So you could have something like a cantrip that I used a lot on one character was basically a knock spell. But what it did was it knocked on a door or knocked on a window. It made it sound like someone was rapping it with their knuckles. That was it. But you would be amazed how useful that is. Or I had a spell that allowed you to sharpen a weapon. I had a cantrip that allowed you to sharpen a single weapon on a single edge once in a battle. Doesn't sound that important, but if you've got weapon durability and your fighter is waiting in there and all of a sudden his double-edged sword is completely blunt, which could happen, he suddenly has one side that he can actually do standard damage with. It doesn't enhance damage, it repairs it. Or minor repair, like you can repair unraveling threads. Things like that. That's the idea with magic being that low. So magic is 2, that gives us 11, okay? So let's keep a track of this, 11. Education. Now bear in mind, these are averages across a world. These are not specific to locations. Education. How high is education? Education is going to be about a 6. But here's the thing. Education is not universal. Even today, education is not universal in the West. Look at the difference in test scores between different schools in a single area. They can be wildly different depending on resources, teachers, so many different things. The reason I'm saying 6 is, if you're a farmer in a field, odds are you might know how to write your name. On the other hand, you have people who would be able to quote entire reams of poetry from memory, who read books all the time, who write books. They represent the upper end of the 6. The 6 is an average over the world. Science reflects directly from this. And that gives us up to 17, which I should keep a list of. Now, if we have any extras at the end of this, we're going to pour them into something else. They're not going to just poof. Science. Science is distinct from technology in this for a reason. Science is an understanding of the physical world, not necessarily your capability of doing something with it. For example, in our world, we have a kind of okay understanding of quantum physics and theoretical physics. However, we can do sweet bugger all with any of it because our technology doesn't match up. So, what does that mean? Their understanding of this world is going to be about a 5. Why about a 5? Well, the people who do understand and do know will understand that, say, it's a binary world, that the moon is actually not a moon, it's a twin planet. They have their mathematics, like certain individuals, their knowledge and education and just personal genius would lead them to be able to calculate, this is a binary planetary system, and that's roughly the orbit point. This makes so much sense. The moon isn't trying to devour us every day. Hallelujah, we're safe. What was that noise in the bushes? So, education at a 5, or science at a 5, it doesn't mean that they're going to have tanks. Bear in mind that the science, understanding, and technological capability is also based on the civilization level. And one of the reasons why we're going to have scattered land masses is we are going to have land masses that are lower tech in comparison and higher tech in comparison. They're going to be land masses where the cultures have a lower universal understanding of the physical world and a higher universal understanding of the physical world. So you could have a landmass where people understand that the moon, where people understand that, say, they can calculate tides, which are going to be fucking wild on this world, let me tell you. Binary world, yeah. So they would be, say, maybe able to calculate tides and have a precise calculation and understanding of when the twilight days happen. On the other hand, on another landmass, maybe only separated by a few hundred miles, you could have peoples who would have a universal, and by universal I mean an average over the entire population, understanding of science where they do understand, and it is widely accepted that this world is a binary planet system. That it's not a world being orbited by a moon, it's that they're orbiting a shared point. They might understand that. They may understand, say, that not unmoving, but the brighter, untwinkling stars in the sky are actually other worlds, other planets. But they wouldn't necessarily have any comprehension of how to reach them. Think, think round the era of H.G. Wells. You know, around that era, we knew so much about the physical world and the science of our solar system. On the other hand, we didn't have a huge understanding of how in the fuck to get there. So, that's that. Tech. Average tech is going to be a 4. Yeah. So that was 22, 26. So let's calculate this up. So that's a yeah, that's a 4. Okay, that's weird. Okay, so we have 12. Maths is hard. 17, 26. So we're halfway through. Tech. Tech is, do they have the wheel? And I'm way off on that. And that should be here. Right. Do they have the wheel? It affects things like shipbuilding. It would affect things which on a world like this would be important. It would affect things like, can they make a telescope? Do they even know what a telescope is? Do they have astrolabes? That is directly related to science, but you also have to have the capability of making it and understanding the physical world to a great enough degree that you can make instruments and objects to interact, measure, supplant. Tech measures their capability to actually make those things. So, relatively simple, okay? So we're up to 26. Culture. Culture is things like art. Not science. No. This is specifically stuff that everyone shares in. So we have art, music, theatre. You have the degree to which people have a say in their cultures. An advanced culture might be a dictatorship or a kingdom, but it could also be a democracy. A lot of it has to do with things like, are there books? How many are written every year? Now here's the thing. You have a relatively high education up here. Science, tech are okay. You have a high faith, lowish magic. So I think culture should probably be around the 8 mark. So it should be over here. And that brings us up to 34. Wow, we're getting through them. Eek. We have 16 left to split between military and prior civilizations. So having a culture, a high culture, it's not really so much about creating or writing the world. It's more about giving the players something to interact with. So to put this all another way, education is how likely are the player characters to be able to read, write, add, subtract, do mathematics, read a map, understand a map. Okay? Science is how likely they are to understand the world beyond the point of the gods made it. Technology actually reflects on things like the technology of the culture, of the civilization itself, and what the player characters have access to in terms of weapons, equipment, boats, modes of transportation, wheels. Faith, pretty fucking obvious. Okay? Magic, and faith is also, there's going to be faith magic as well, and it's going to define how powerful the faith magic of a player character might be. Magic will define how powerful the arcane magic of a player might be. Culture would refers to what is there for the player characters to see, hear, and interact with. Basically. And the way I typically use this metric is not every civilization is going to have sculpture or art galleries or theatre or dramatics or opera. So you can have them go from a region where there's very little of that or none to a region where they are drowning in culture, where suddenly all of their horizons are opened. And that's important for the world as a whole, because it allows you to create a situation where it's very easy to go, there's a renaissance happening in insert name of place. Militarization. Militarization is not specifically are there huge armies. It's more along the lines of how much war there is going on at any given time. Now, there are going to be 3 player characters starting out. That is 3 wildly different cultures, wildly different civilizations, all competing for the same resources, more or less, and not necessarily seeing eye to eye. So this is going to be a solid 7, because guess what? A peaceful world is probably going to be a boring world. There's nothing to fight. It's going to be relatively difficult to actually have a fun game. You know, there's a reason why role-playing games have combat systems. It's because combat is fun in a role-playing game. That's why we have this in here. Prior civilizations. So that brings us up to 34 plus 7 is 41. Wow, we have 9 left. And we're not going to put them all into prior civilizations. Why do we have prior civilizations in this? You're a GM. You want to send the party on an adventure. Go forth, my friends. You must go into the dungeon of insert random generic fantasy name and bring back the item of undescribable power if a generic item fantasy name. You can't do that if there's not any prior civilizations. Now, bear in mind, a prior civilization does not mean completely disassociated from the current civilization. The Elder Scrolls series of games is a great example of this. There are places in those that are dungeons. Say, a good example would be the barrows in Skyrim. They're still in use. But they belong to an older Skyrim, to an older Nordic civilization. And that's okay. It's still an older civilization, which is technically a different civilization. I mean, you only have to look at the change in their equipment and what have you. So, this is going to matter for a few different things. First of all, it gives the GM the option to say, in the ancient times, this civilization did X. Go and find Y. It gives you options. So, bear in mind, these are average scores. These are not universal. So, we're going to say there is an average of 5 prior civilizations. So, we're going to go to here. That should be over here. Which brings us up to a grand total of 46 points spent. And as you can see, we have really low, really high. I mean, it's... You know, it's pretty jagged. And to be honest, I find this kind of world much more interesting than a world that follows like that. So, like, for example, add a layer, blue. A lot of worlds might be kind of like that, where it's, you know, here, 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 and here. And it's a much smoother transition, but I don't think it allows for the same kind of interesting changes and the kind of jarring shifts in culture or jarring shifts in technology. Now, we are going to go into defining that in the next episode. We're going to define more what each of these means for this particular world. But I think this should show you that there is something to be said for using essentially a character generation system for a role-playing setting. Now, here's the thing. I had 50 points in total. I only used 46, which means I have 4 left. Now, I could bump magic up to 6. I could, but I'm not going to. I want magic to be weaker, arcane magic to be weaker. But what I will do is I will bump it up to 3. What that means is, in addition to cantrips, really powerful mages might be able to summon like a magic missile once per day. Or they might be able to cast like a level 1 AD&D spell. So we're now up to 47. Science, education, technology. I'm going to bring technology up to a 5, so that what we have instead, so what we have instead is this. Okay. So we're going to bump that up to a 5. That's 48. And I'm going to trash the other two. Don't want them. Bringing technology up to the same level as the science basically means that if they would basically mean that, say, a culture that has a good understanding of astronomy wouldn't necessarily be relying on their naked eyes anymore, or the very old, the classical version of an astrolabe, which was basically a circular piece of wood with a stick and a plumb bob. They would have better astrolabes. They would have slightly better telescopes. Their ships would be slightly better. It's not saying that it's going to be a vast difference, but it's going to be a difference. So what we have here is a world where it's relatively educated. Bear in mind, this is going to be basically late Middle Ages. So this is a world where, on average, it's going to be late Middle Ages with relatively high education. Like, pretty much everyone knows how to write their name. Pretty much everyone knows how to add, subtract, has basic mathematical skills. Some people, the average people, might be able to read a book or even read their other people's names. And then you have people at the upper strata who are comparative geniuses, primarily by view of educational access. So we have a world where science is okay. Most people will understand to a degree that tides are a thing and that they are, they're a physical attribute rather than a divine attribute, stuff like that. And part of that will come from the fact that because it's such a high magic world, a high faith world, you have a situation where people will understand the gods will understand their gods to a degree which is kind of interesting. So by understanding their gods, it means they're more likely to understand what is affected by the gods and what is affected by the universe as a whole. So those two actually link together quite well. Technology obviously links directly across, and in this case it basically means that what technology they have access to is pretty good. It's about average quality. Occasionally it'll be an extremely high quality, but you are far less likely to get a 10 piece of technology than, say, something below it. So the way I would describe this is it's almost an inverse rule, so that like level 1 technologies are like 100% probability of being able to get access to, and then a 2 would be like a 90%. See what I mean? And then as you get up to the 10s, it wouldn't be a 0, but it would like be a 1% probability of getting a 10 level technology, or even a lower percentage than that, and a 10 being relative to this time period in our world. So I'm going to be referring to the Byzantium quite a lot in this series, and say a 10 in Byzantium would be something like a steam operated automaton, which did exist, or a clockwork automaton, which did exist. One of the emperors of Byzantium, I can't remember which one, had steam operated lions that opened their jaws and roared, and he had little birds that chirped and moved their wings. So that would be like a 10, but bear in mind one guy in the world has access to it. So it would be like 0.001 or something like that. It's minuscule, but it's possible. So that would be how science and technology will work in this. Faith, everyone has a connection to their gods. People who have a stronger connection will be much more powerful. and vice versa. We will put a check and balance in place for that when we're generating the actual character classes. Magic, the opposite. Physically not very, or magically not very powerful. There will be checks and balances going forward. Culture, there is lots. On average, there are lots for the citizens of this world to interact with and see. There are festivals. There is music. There is art. There is literature. There is painting. Most places. Again, inverse slide rule. Level 1 culture, you're definitely going to have it, which could be just tribal singing. And then so on, up and up and up. Military does connect to technology to a large degree in what equipment they'll have. But in this, militarization is specifically to do with how much war is going on average. It's not saying there aren't periods of global peace. There will be, because of course there will be. But you're far more likely to come across a time where 2 cities are at war, or 2 kingdoms are at war, or 2 tribes are in the process of wiping each other out. And then finally, prior civilizations. Prior civilizations, again, are how many civilizations were there before the current one on a given landmass. Now, if you have the 3 different races on the same landmass, it doesn't necessarily follow that there will be 5, like there would be, say, 5 prior civilizations for each of them. There might only be 1 prior civilization that was particularly widespread and very powerful for one of them, who happened to enslave the others. And I would say that it is largely, that these civilizations would be largely governed by the whole, by all of these. But I would also say don't be frightened. If you're going to be using like something like this to create your own game world, don't be frightened to have like a civilization, an ancient civilization that has a tech level of 10. Like, don't be. It's fine. It's an ancient civilization. Maybe the only thing that exists, that the only piece of high technology that's survived is a plasma rifle with like 2 shots. Just 2 shots left in the plasma rifle, and there's no way to refill it. There's no way to recharge it. You fire off 1 shot to test it, and you go, oh shit, there's only 1 shot left. Because maybe the 2 civilizations share their counting system, their number system. And you're like, wow, this is fucking endgame boss killing territory. We keep this for the final fight. And you could have an entire campaign set around finding this 1 item with this 1 attack that can almost kill the big bad at the end. That's what prior civilizations are for. And I really think that is probably it for today. I'll save that afterwards. So I hope this is making some sense to people. I hope I'm just not talking into the ether. Next time we are going to go into a bit more of the definition of things. Like we're going to take, say, actually next week, not next week, but in a fortnight's time, we're going to take, say, education, science, and technology, and we're actually going to define the average of each across this world. And I mean, we're actually going to define it to a larger degree. Although maybe I want to do something different. I'll be honest here, I'm not entirely certain what I'm going to do with the next episode. I'm kind of thinking that route. I'm kind of thinking maybe I need to map the world out, at least do the basic map of the world, so we have an understanding of where cultures are and how they interact with one another. Maybe I should start working on a player race. Maybe. So I hope you're enjoying this, and of course we'll be back again in a fortnight's time. This has gone on for 51 freaking minutes. Wow. Well, probably about 50 with the edits. Yeah. Anyway, I hope this is helpful to someone. I hope someone enjoys this. If you do, just give me some feedback of some kind. Let me know. Yeah. Back again in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, have a great day. Have a great weekend. Be good. And bye for now.